Howdy, partners. Welcome to episode 27 of the show where we stay away from LA and discuss the rest of the West. I'm elated to bring in the big brain of Bobby Marks, our front office guru. Bobby, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Getting ready for these play-in, and for those 10 teams who are not, they are probably getting ready. They're probably on a plane to Cancun or on the golf course, or if you're down there in Dallas trying to figure out what went wrong.
Well, I'm down in Dallas. I think we figured out what went wrong, or at least we figured out a lot of that. Bobby, we got to figure out how to get this thing back right. So listen, this season is done and buried for the Mavericks, pending the NBA's investigation. Geez, were they tanking? Let's figure that one out. They did tank. They did it to keep the best odds of being able to hold on to this top 10 protected pick that they owe the New York Knicks. 80% chance they keep it now after a successful tank job, pending the league investigation. Bobby, it's real simple here as far as what like the challenge in front of Mark Cuban, Nico Harris, and the rest of this Mavericks front office is, and that's, hey, you don't want to put Luke in a position where it makes sense for him to say, man, do I need to force a trade? The urgency is there to get this thing back right this year. So I'm going to crack into your big front office brain because they need help, Bobby. They need help.
I mean, I think if you would have looked at this year and there was maybe like 3 or 4 like key injuries or guys were out for the whole year, I think that draft pick probably doesn't become as valuable as they see it, because you could say, hey, player X is coming back from this injury. We've got this other player coming back. I just think when you look at it from a big picture, it's almost similar to, I guess, Portland a year ago, where they looked at how do we get Jeremy Grant, right? Like, how do we turn I guess it was a future pick into an established player. And I think if you're Dallas, outside of Luka and outside of Kyrie, let's say he's coming back, which I think is the likelihood is going to happen. Like, what else? What are your available? Who's your key guys, and what are your trade assets?
Okay, let's start right there.
Yep.
Obviously, Luka is often we're trying to build around him category. For the sake of this discussion, we will say they're going to bring back Kyrie. You talked on your YouTube show that you did yesterday, where your breakdown of the Mavericks offseason. You would try to give Kyrie a 3-year deal. I think they're probably going to have to go 4 years max. Yeah, but for the sake of this discussion, for now, we'll get to the what ifs later. Let's say they sign Kyrie for whatever the contract is. What do you see as their positive trade assets?
Well, if they keep the pick, they can trade it the night of the draft. The rights to that player the night of the draft, that's value, right? So minimum the 10th pick in the draft. I mean, could you imagine the commissioner's face on May 16th when Dallas is in the top 3? Oh my goodness. I was going to say, hey, if those 3%, if the 3% odds land and they get Victor, then problem solved. Mavs back on the right track. All is good. All is good in the world. All is good in the world. Yeah. But yeah, the draft pick is certainly a value asset. I think their younger players, Hardy is a value asset, based on what he can do on the court and what he can, certainly on a really good contract. Josh Green
year into a 3-year second-round rookie contract.
Yeah, Josh Green's going into the last year of that rookie contract. He's extension eligible, right? One of those young players. When I was writing their offseason, I didn't realize that him and Luka would be the only 2 rookie extensions they've had since 2008. That is a remark. Devin Harris, I think, was the last guy before Luka was.
The only other candidate that they've had in that span, Jalen was a unique situation because, as you broke down, they screwed up his rookie contract, so he was unrestricted. But they could have gotten an extension done with him before he hit unrestricted. Other than that, their only other candidate they've really had is Jay Crowder, who they ended up sending to Boston in the Rajon Rondo deal, which is another. We can go down the list of whoops in Mavericks front office history going back to the previous regime. That's one of them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Everybody has. I can write a book on made mistakes, right? But it's how do you clean it up, right? How do you fix it so it's not you're not telling me the guys in San Antonio had mistakes, but they had stuff during their heyday. They were able to clean it up.
San Antonio in the last few years has cut 2 number 1 picks while they're on their recent contract. One because of off-court conduct, and one because they just were like, man, this guy can't play. But again, so we're looking at Jaden Hardy, who I think the goal for him, if he's not traded this summer, the goal for him, he will play some summer league.
Yeah.
I would put him at point guard in the summer league, even though that's not his position. I try to take the same path that Memphis Grizzlies did with Desmond Bane, develop point guard skills because you're going to need those playing the role you're going to be in. I would try to have him develop to the point where he can be your bucket getting 6-man next season if he's not traded. Josh Green, I would be aggressive trying to get an extension done, because I think if you don't, the price is not going to get lower, right? He made a lot of progress this year, certainly was inconsistent, but he's a keeper. He's a guy who, as you talk to front office people around the league, as I know you do a lot of, people like Josh Green. Maxi Kleber, I think, has some trade value, although this was a tough year, obviously, with the injury, and then he just wasn't himself when he got back. Have we gotten to the end of the list in terms of positive trade value for roster players?
Yeah, I mean, Hardaway Jr. has got another couple years left. I mean,
it is descending contract.
Yeah, I mean, so and I don't think he's like Bertans. I think you have to attach something to.
Bertans, just to be clear, is owed $17 million next year, and then it's like $4 million guarantee the year after that.
Yep. So that's your kitty of tradable contracts.
And then the picks, as you mentioned, basically, if they keep this pick, they can trade it. The guy will put on a Mavericks hat, but you can do a deal before that, as we've seen 100 times. So you can trade that pick because they've traded 2029, and they still would owe the Knicks a pick that's protected top 10, 24 or 25. They would be restricted to only also being able to put 27 in a deal. Now, if the lottery gods kick the Mavericks in the cojones, they still owe 2029 unprotected to Brooklyn from the Kyrie deal. They're limited to 25 at that point, because if you're giving up 23, you can't give up 24, correct?
Well, no, you can, because you're looking ahead.
Okay.
So basically the draft would be considered over. So now we're starting with the 24 draft count. So then you can move 24 and 26.
Okay. So they would have 2 to play with still at that point. So either way, you got 2 to play with, basically.
Yeah. And you've got no second round picks.
No second
round. By
the way. and look, getting back to that, you say, well, this, you gave up a first round pick for Christian Wood, but you know what? They would have picked Jaden Hardy with that number 26 anyways. Okay, but they gave up 2 seconds to move up, or to basically get the pick that got Hardy. So it's not major assets, but if those second round picks didn't have value, the Mavericks wouldn't have given them all up to make deals happen. By the way, they threw a second round pick in to get off of Porzingis. Now, what do they have to show for that? Well, they gave up Dinwiddie in the Kyrie trade, and they've got Bertans with that bloated contract that we've talked about. Man, okay, so that's...
Oh, and they have Reggie Bullock too. We forgot about Reggie Bullock. He's got a partial guarantee. I mean, I would think, it's like, I think a June 30th date, June 29th date. I mean, I would think that becomes guaranteed, unless they all of a sudden decide, you know what, we want to go the cap space way. But I mean, as you know, like the cap space way is like, I love cap flexibility, man. But like Christian Wood's not going to be back, right? Like, I think we could rule out. So basically the cap space way is no Kyrie, no Christian Wood, Dwight Powell, who it was funny.
I think Dwight will be back on a minimum, to be honest with you.
I put, when I did my whiteboard, I had like resources to build a roster and own free agents. And I put Dwight Powell up there, and the hate from the Mavericks fans were like, I really never really read my mentions and stuff, but like, oh my.
You might be surprised, but the Mavericks fans aren't a big fan of mine either right now.
Well, they think you want to get Luka out of there. So
right. Listen, to be clear,
yeah,
it would be in my best interest to keep Luka in Texas forever.
So you want to get Luka out of there to get the marquee guy out of the area where you cover.
Right, because you know what? I would definitely love to be on the road 180 nights a year like I was before when the Mavericks were completely irrelevant. Trust me.
And they can say,
the
hey,
Mavericks
Tim,
uniform helps me too. I want home playoff games. They failed to get one.
You know what? Luke is not here anymore, Tim. I think you should go live in Oklahoma City. No offense to my friends in Oklahoma City, but
hey, it's a 30-minute flight, and I'll make that commute. I ain't moving, brother.
I don't even know where we were. Oh, we're about your. I mean, yeah, and Dwight and the Caps.
Yeah,
and the Caps space way.
You know what? We should have put Reggie in at least. Like, hey, he's a $10.5 million expiring contract. You can't. The partial guarantees, if you're trying to create cap space, that doesn't apply in a trade. Yeah. And hey, Mavs fans don't love Bullock. I'll point out the guy was playing 40+ minutes per game and playing well when you made a Western Conference playoff run. The three comes and goes, obviously, but he's a quality defender. As a $10.5 million expiring contract, certainly he can be of use in a trade. But the other thing is, like, hey, if the Mavericks are making trades, like, what do they need? What do they really need aside from just like pure star power, talent? Defense. They already gave up one of their two wing defenders, right? And they missed Dorian Finney-Smith. And then the rim protection thing, like, holy, and that's why they hate Dwight Powell. The problem is Dwight is a nice backup center who's had to start. That's not his fault. Yeah. That's an organizational failure. You went and signed JaVale McGee to be the starting center, and it was a complete bust. Don't blame Dwight Powell for that. He didn't do it.
Well, and that's the other thing. If we're turning the clock back a little bit from a year ago, we've beaten the Brunson situation to death here. But when Brunson goes and then you basically only had your taxman level, like, you got to hit on those guys. Like, when you have such limited, like Joe Ingles, Milwaukee, right? When he came back, DiVincenzo, Golden State, guys that can kind of come in and contribute. And they're probably, the likelihood is those guys are only here for 1 or 2 years. Maybe they're a 1-year flyer, but at least for that immediate impact, and to be stuck on, he's got 2 more years left after this year, and not really have a role. I mean, he played, a little bit down. Yeah. I mean, the Atlanta game was probably the best he played, that game on the road, where they lost in overtime. But you got to hit on that. I mean, it just can't be a revolving door there.
So let's go the other way with Kyrie, and let's say, and we're going to do a couple different things. We're going to go the cap space route, and then we're going to talk about what honestly I think might end up would be the best case scenario and also the least likely scenario, and that's using his bird rights in a sign and trade.
Yeah.
Okay, so the cap space route.
Yep.
Kyrie's gone for nothing.
Yep.
As you said, you're renouncing the rights of Christian Wood, of all your other free agents. Dwight Powell, I think's back for a minimum, but you can renounce his rights and re-sign him for a minimum. Dude, even if they were able to, first of all, I think you're trying to move guys for cap space in that situation, but like, as you said, you don't have second-round picks to give up. Dude, to give up a first-round pick to move salary when you've put yourself in such a tough situation, oof. We're looking at 20-something million in cap space. Like, what can you do with that?
Well, I mean, it ain't gonna get you James Harden. I'm just throwing out names. It's not gonna get you James Harden. It's not gonna. I mean, you don't need a guard. I mean, it ain't gonna get you Fred VanVleet, probably. I don't think. Middleton. I mean, the Khris Middleton situation is going to be fascinating because he's got a player option, and I don't know where he is health wise.
Well, let's talk about Middleton, because that's the guy I kind of had in mind. And as you mentioned, there is obviously pretty significant health concerns. He has not played much this year, but we are talking about a guy who is a proven championship core piece. Okay. Who has history playing with Jason Kidd, who is when healthy, a phenomenal two-way player. The guy can defend. He's a really good, versatile wing defender. He's an efficient 20+ point per game scorer. He can like a healthy Khris Middleton would be a phenomenal fit.
Yep.
With Luka Doncic, and he does have a relationship with Jason Kidd. obviously J Kidd coached him in Milwaukee as he was developing. Only played 33 games this year. There was wrist, there was knee. The other thing that we're talking about here, they're in a win now mode, but obviously they're also trying to build something where Luka feels like he's got a chance to win a championship moving forward. And we are talking about a player who is going to turn 32 years old this summer. And then he's got a decision to make. Will he opt out of the last year of his contract? And, you got to look at this contract number, because if you're opting out, obviously you're doing it to get paid. And the contract number that he would be opting out of, $40 million.
Yeah. The only way you're opting out is that you're going to, basically make that up in a longer term deal. So if you opt out and let's say you sign for 30, right? All right. How do I make it up that 10?
Right.
And then it's basically 2 or 3 years. I mean, for Dallas's sake, like your best thing would be for him. And this is kind of like backdoor deals here. Like you opt in and then you work out a trade instead of, instead work out a trade. I mean, if the goal is to still, keep Kyrie, if you're not going to keep Kyrie and you're just basically going to try to target a guy with cap space, you're staring at like 30 million there. And unless you clear more money out, right? Like I think Kleber, you could move in a deal. I don't think I don't know. I don't know if you have to attach. I mean, you don't really have much to attach. That's the problem.
He's interesting to me because he is a guy who, when I talk to other GMs around the league, like he's a guy people like, but at his age, with his injury history and his recent injury history, and the fact that he really struggled, well, understandably so, like the fact he came back from a hamstring tear and surgery mid-season to play was pretty remarkable. But like he really struggled, now, hey, Max, easy job. You're coming back from a torn hammy and surgery. Prop up this god awful defense. He wasn't able to do it, but his value would be interesting. Okay, another guy I just want to throw out, and again, we're just looking at potential cap space type scenarios. Draymond Green, does that do anything for you?
Yeah, I mean, so you're basically, you would have Draymond because that's cap space, and then you still have your role players. So you wouldn't have to get rid of them. You're basically, your backcourt would probably be Hardy and Luka, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're looking at. You're going to throw the young kid out there.
Well, I think we could maybe throw in, maybe you start Josh Green, bring Hardy off the bench. You got Bullock at the 3, Draymond at the 4. So the Draymond thing, just again, I'm just throwing out guys who I think could help you win now.
Yep.
And you might be able to get, if you're in a situation where you've got 20 some odd, maybe you bump it up to 30 million in cap space. And, Draymond, obviously it's been a whole awkward dance with the Warriors for a while, and he's got a player option. And it's kind of, hey, are they going to keep paying the kind of the historic level of luxury tax that they're paying to keep this core of a dynasty together or not? Obviously that's, you got to figure that out first. And that's not something for the Mavericks to figure out. That's for the Warriors to figure out. Oh, by the way, hey, is Bob Myers going to be making that call? There's a lot there. Yeah. There's a lot there, but with Draymond, again, I'm scrolling as almost like I could have done research before. $27.6 million player option. So if he opts out of that, Draymond's and he has said, he's made it very clear, he thinks he's a max player. He wants a raise. We'll see what the market is. But, you're paying multiple years at that type of money or more for Draymond Green, who obviously is a historically awesome defensive player. I do think he would really fit with the Mavericks in terms of, you're the same way teams have struggled after trapping Steph up high on the floor for years because Draymond's such an awesome downhill playmaker coming out of that, super high pick and roll. Like that directly applies to it if he's playing with Luka. The Mavericks have had chemistry issues. They can go boom or bust with Draymond, but he's a voice that guys will absolutely respect. I don't think you're going to be, not paying attention to detail defensively if you want to, have Draymond across the locker room from you. But again, we're talking about he's 33 years old, all those things. So I'm just trying to throw out some scenarios of guys who might be available in free agency, who might be.
I think for Draymond, it's interesting because if I was Dallas, and it's almost like going back to that same situation, I would prefer for him, let's say if Golden State is not going to keep him, well, you lose him, you don't get anything, right? You're basically just getting tax savings.
Right.
And you got Clay and you got Steph and you've got
Kuminga,
Kuminga. So is there like, hey, can I opt into my contract and can we work out a trade now? And then extend
right
off that in it, which makes it a little more cleaner because you don't have to, you could still keep Kyrie, for example, you could, you would lose certain guys. It might cost you, maybe cost you Green,
right.
Green and I'm just Hardaway, for example, just throwing that out there. That might be a little bit more cleaner because like the extension rules, are changed in this new CBA where you can extend for more money. Draymond can get that, he'd be at that $27 million number this year, but for next year, it could be 40, right? It could be, you add 2 for 80 on to whatever he's got for this year. That's a little more cleaner than him just coming in room. Hey, we got 27, but it cost us 4 guys. Now it's Draymond, Luka, the 2 young kids, and then the role players. Right. Like that's kind of, I think if you're Dallas, you're thinking like, well, how, and the 10th pick too. If you're Dallas, you're thinking, all right.
But you know what? Maybe that 10th pick might be part of a deal.
That's the thing, because like, as we're doing this and there's this process of elimination, like you just run out of things, right? Like you run out of contracts, you run out of young players. We run out of draft picks where like that
second rounders.
Well, that's the thing. And it's just kind of like sitting there. And that's why I went back to like, when I used that Jeremy Grant example with Portland as a big example. The difference, though, is that Portland was sitting on this like $20 million trade exception. Like they basically just said, like, we'll take that contract in. You'll take that. I think it was like 2025 first in the deal to slide in there. Or Dallas is not sitting on one of these big, these big exceptions.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. Even if Kyrie comes back, you've got a path to Draymond on the roster. Again, these are like, you got to spitball things.
Yeah.
Right. We're talking about things that what the percentage of these things happening, not high. Boy, you better run through all the possible scenarios.
Well, and that's what you're doing. I mean, they're probably going to take a little time off to just decompress a little bit, but you're going to sit in your big conference room, your whiteboard, and you're going to put up all these options, right? You're going to put up your roster, your current roster. You're going to do your, with Kyrie, without Kyrie, and then basically kind of, with cap space, trade candidates. We're going to circle up there. We'll see what happens on May 16th with the lottery. 10th pick equals, a list of guys that would make sense as far as that could help. So yeah, I mean, you're going to go through, they're going to have so many different scenarios available. I mean, they should, that by the time we get to the end of June, they're going to have to pick one, right? I mean, that's the reality of it.
Okay. So sign and trade scenarios with Kyrie. And again, least likely of the scenarios, because obviously it requires Kyrie's cooperation and it requires the cooperation of another team. The Clippers we can include in this because
the hard cap, you can. So, the Clippers would be a tough one. Milwaukee teams like that would be tough. Yeah,
we know two other teams that showed interest in Kyrie before the Mavericks traded for him. Right, those are the Los Angeles Lakers and the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the Lakers very well could basically all the guys they brought in the three-way deal with the Wolves and the Jazz and Rui Hachimura, they could basically say, we don't want any of you guys back, and get to cap space to be able to sign Kyrie outright if they so chose. That's an option. Sign and trade, it's very difficult to see something that makes sense for either team. And I want to be very careful with the way I phrase this. the absolute pie in the sky, tiny sliver of a best case scenario for the Mavericks would be if AD, who, we've heard, I'm not going to say sources, grumblings, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh hand grumblings around the league. Hey, AD's not that happy in LA. AD's not that happy in LA. He's got a relationship with Nico Harrison from Nike. I saw them. Well, they were just chatting it up before the Mavs blew that 27-point lead in Dallas against the Lakers this year. If AD said, hey, I want a fresh start, can we figure something out? Do you see any way that the Lakers would be willing to cooperate in a way that would make sense for them in a Kyrie sign and trade?
I think how it makes sense is that you get to keep your rest of your guys. So you wouldn't let's rewind a little bit. So Kyrie going there and just cap space, right? Like, so you're losing all your guys, right? You're losing Russell and Beasley and Vanderbilt, like all those guys you got in the trade. I think you can still keep Austin Rivers and still like you still wouldn't have that, like that $47 million number. That's kind of what Kyrie's staring at. Like you'd be in the, you'd be in the 30s. You'd be in the 30s. So, so the cap space way for Los Angeles, you're basically back to like Westbrook, a better version of Westbrook now with AD and LeBron, right? Like that's your top heavy three guys, and then Austin Reeves. The sign and trade would make more sense, because as I said, you can keep your guys. Like if you decide, you probably are not going to bring back D'Angelo Russell now, but if you want to keep
again a sign and trade for AD, so you're not
right.
Which obviously the Lakers wouldn't want to give up AD, but this would require AD saying, "I want this." Which is,
I've got a year left on my contract. He's got a player option after next season, right? So he's got 2 years left on his deal going in the offseason. He's got a player option. Him basically saying, "Hey, I want a fresh start. I'm going to opt out, and I'm not going to resign." Right? Like Rich Paul's got to play like he's got to pull that card for it to deal.
Rich Paul obviously also represents LeBron James, which adds to the complications.
Yeah. And here's the other thing, sign and trades. So for a guy like Kyrie, 3-year contract at the minimum. Mm-hmm. So you're making it for the Lakers. You're making it. I mean, it doesn't have to be, first year's got to be guaranteed, not years 2 and 3. So you're making a commitment to him beyond LeBron.
Yep.
Right. LeBron's got the same thing as AD. He's got a player option for the following year. He can become a free agent in the summer of 24. So that's what you're staring at if you're the Lakers there.
The Mavs could include picks in that, correct?
Yeah, they can include picks in that.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Because honestly, if I'm Rob Pelinka, I'm like, dude, AD, if you want out, like you've got more value than Kyrie Irving. Like, something's got to make sense for us here. And then, so again, I want to just emphasize, we are talking about a tiny percent chance of this happening, but we're just discussing all the potential scenarios. A thing that has a slightly larger, tiny percent chance of happening, a sign and trade with the Phoenix Suns. And I am just going to lay out a couple of facts here. DeAndre Ayton's relationship with the Phoenix Suns, to be polite, is awkward. DeAndre Ayton is also represented by Bill Duffy, Luka Doncic's primary agent. The Dallas Mavericks have a gaping hole at their starting center. The Dallas Mavericks believe that DeAndre Ayton is an extremely talented young big man who has a lot of untapped potential. Those are the facts. As far as another fact, KD and Kyrie Irving did not even make eye contact.
Right.
The Suns came to Dallas. Where that relationship is, I have no idea. They were best friends, Brooklyn buddies. That thing broke up. Would KD have interest in reuniting with Kyrie? I have no idea. For the sake of this discussion, let's pretend like he does. Some kind of Kyrie for DeAndre Ayton framework. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on. So what happens to Chris Paul, right? That's the other.
I'll say this: the Mavericks would be very willing to discuss a deal where he also came back with the contract where, it's basically, if it works out, great. If not, he's off the books next year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think because where Phoenix is with Booker and KD, your finances are up there a little bit. So when you're looking at the, signing trades, not exceeding the apron, all that stuff. So you got to figure out the money part of it. But it's similar to kind of like, when we just talked about the Lakers, where you like, if you're Dallas, you're not gutting it, right? You're not gutting it. You're not signing DeAndre Ayton as a free agent, right? You're basically just swapping him for another player, and you can keep whatever you want, and you can keep, whatever, the 10th pick and your other role players, and kind of try to do something else with that.
Yeah, and with Ayton, he's making 32.5
Yep.
now. So if you're talking about Kyrie getting for Kyrie to cooperate on these kind of things, I think he is going to have to get max. Like, clearly he believes he's a max player. I'd be surprised if he's going to settle for less than that. So you would have to make the money work.
Well, and the other thing too, Tim, I think, like, if it's not Dallas, right? Like, I just don't see a cap space route, like, just with the teams that have room, like, just sliding him in there, right? Unless all of a sudden Houston comes in and, like, if let's say they miss out, and then Harden, and, like, he's their guy, right? He's their guy for 3 years, 140 million, like, to pair with Jalen Green.
I would say this: if Houston doesn't land Harden, the Rockets are absolutely determined to land a marquee star in free agency this summer.
Well, you saw what they did with the Kevin Porter thing, which, I mean,
3.5 million more cap space.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't hurt him because Porter's. It was like almost like trying to explain people this, like, wait a minute, he just lost. No, he didn't. His contract doesn't start till July 1. It's the extension. Yeah. They basically shaved off because a likely became an unlikely bonus because he missed it by 1 game. So that opened up another 2.5 in room. So obviously they are, and Raphael Stones, he said, hey, we're the leader in the clubhouse with cap space. You don't come out and say that if you're going to just take back guys and expiring contracts for draft picks. Like, there is a accelerated rebuild that has to happen down there.
Tillman Fertitta was sold on a 3-year rebuild. Those 3 years are over.
Yep.
There's also little benefit to being bad moving forward because you're playing with fire. When top 4 protected pick to the Thunder for the Russell Westbrook trade, top 4 protected 24 and 26. So
yeah, just ask the Bulls on those top 4 protected picks.
But again,
those turn into.
Would Kyrie Irving really go to Houston? You know what? I don't know. But what I'm telling you is this: I think Kyrie will have leverage to get a long-term max deal. So that's part of the equation that the Mavericks are dealing with. Just on Ayton, again, I think the Mavericks would absolutely be not just willing, but excited about a deal, building that deal out to include Chris Paul, who's $30 million, is half guaranteed next year. It would be fully guaranteed if he's in that trade. And then the year after, it's $30 million that's not guaranteed. So again, if Chris Paul comes in and works his, short-term leadership magic, and by the way, I think he would be a good fit with Luka health if he's healthy. He damn sure is going to establish some accountability there. Then you bring him back next year. If it doesn't work out, you wash your hands. Landry Shamit's the other guy who you could throw in that deal. He's a little bit over $10 million in salary, serviceable bench player, So those are the best ideas I have, Bobby.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the goal, though, is that you cannot allow him to leave for nothing. I mean, that is the big thing. Like I said, like, you can't go 2 years in a row of losing Jalen and Kyrie for nothing.
Yeah,
so you basically have traded, in hindsight, Brunson, Kyrie, Dinwiddie, Finney Smith, and draft picks, and there's no return value.
Yeah.
Cap space.
And honestly, you go all the way back to the original Porzingis deal and throw those in the equation. It has been a rough 5-year run of building around a generational superstar for the Dallas Mavericks. The advice that we've given them here is free, and it's worth every single penny. But they've got a tough gig in front of them this summer. Bobby, glad to have you on our side. I appreciate you joining me. Any parting words for Cuban, Nico, and company?
No, I mean, I think the parting words would be that, just because a guy signs a 5-year rookie extension doesn't mean he's going to be there for 5 years. I think once that extension signed, which was, I guess, was it 2 years ago when Lucas signed that?
This was the first year.
This is year one.
And last year, by the way, is a player option. So it's
contracts don't, in this day and age, contracts don't mean anything. Like, he can wake up tomorrow morning and be like, you know what? It's not for me, and all of a sudden the ball starts rolling. And I think they know that. And that's why they made it a priority to try to retain that pick, because they knew if, like, what they didn't want was to get into play-in, lose, and all of a sudden the 11th pick in the draft's going to New York. And then we're like, it's 2 weeks from now. And Lucas being like, well, how do we get help? Well, one of those assets just left. And now it's basically re-signing Kyrie and seeing what we can do with future draft picks. I think that they know that. I mean, that they wouldn't have gone through that charade last week. I mean, I said it on TV. I would have done it. Like, I don't know if I would have walked into the bank without a ski mask on. No, there was a way to do it all, right? And
you don't listen to 22-year-old as rest in a winner be eliminated game.
Oh, I was texting with you doing a Chicago game. I said, "Holy cow! Can you imagine if this team wins? Like, what do you do if they win on?" And they'd have to roll out the guys on Sunday, right?
I was texting with people inside the organization who had the same exact thought, and suddenly Luka went from he's going to play to just the first quarter,
and then things started and threes started hitting the side of the backboard, and that whole crew was playing basically 40 minutes, the bench guys here. But no, they know what I mean, listen, at the end of the day, if Mark Cuban gets fined $1 million and they keep the 10th pick in the draft, it's an investment.
Yeah. If
it goes up to 3 or 2, it's an investment like that. They knew what they were doing last week. And that's why, and I've heard you talk about it. I mean, it's a lot of, if we want to and start an investigation into Portland or Utah or any, we can go on a list. Like, we can go down. The problem was
they're investigating honesty.
Yes. The problem was that J-Kid's a smoking gun, right? Like, and because of the play-in considerations where they didn't control their own destiny. If they controlled their own destiny,
Utah did not either, by the way. And
yes. So I get what Dallas did. I would have done it. I probably wouldn't have slept good at night, after I did it. But I mean, this is kind of this is where they are right now, right? I mean, this is where they are. And now they've got, their off season starts early and they've got 3 to 4 months to try to fix this.
Desperate times lead to drastic measures. I will say this. Obviously, my reporting was the Mavs fear if they don't get this thing back in the next year that Luka might next summer consider a trade request. I will say this. I believe that Luka will look for reasons to stay in Dallas. The Mavericks have to give him some. That's what this summer is about.
Yep.
Bobby, I appreciate you, brother. I know you are busy. You've got 30 teams to do this with, and I appreciate you making a little bit of extra time for the Mavericks here on Howdy Partners.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Adios, amigos.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.